Hello, everyone. So in this video, we'll talk about one way to measure a player's power in a weighted voting system. So last time we talked a little bit about how in a weighted voting system, you can count um, the number of winning coalitions that would not be winning if a player were to leave that coalition. Those were called critical players in a given coalition. And each time a player was critical in a winning coalition, we made a count, and we came up with the critical counts. So let's recall um, what that was. So in a weighted voting system, we had the critical counts B1, B2, up through Bn, where again we remember we have n players, where there are players P1, P2, up to Pn. And each of those players, you'll recall, had weights, W1, W2, and this was a part of the weighted voting system, and there was a quota as well. But all of that was in a few videos ago, but now, once we had that weighted voting system, we were able to come up with these numbers, B1, B2, up to Bn. These were called the critical counts for our players. Now, we can compute what's called the total critical count. Total critical count. And that's just the sum of all of the critical counts. The book uses the letter T to denote this sum. So we just add up all of the critical counts. And once we do that, we can ask what the proportion of T comes from any given player. And that is called the Banzhaf Power Index for that particular player. So the Banzhaf Power Index is denoted by the Greek letter beta for a given player. And what is it? So beta 1, well, as I said, we take the critical count for player 1, B1, and we take the proportion of T. So we just divide by T. Now, it's a good idea, I think, in practice to just leave this as a fraction. Sometimes you can put a percentage if it's nice, but you don't have to unless you're asked to do that. Okay, so these are numbers associated to our players, and these numbers are meant to give sort of the relative impact or influence a player has in a weighted voting system. And why is that? Well, you're thinking about, for a given player, if you were in a situation where you're trying to pass a motion, how many situations will that player be critical relative to the other players being critical? So how many scenarios can you run where that player's presence in that winning coalition is vital? And that number, that percentage of winning coalitions where you have a vital or a critical player for that particular where that particular player is the critical player, that percentage is this power index, that proportion. Okay, so I'm sorry if that um, is a little bit opaque, but it's measuring sort of how much impact a given player has uh, to pass measures or to pass motions, pardon me. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and go through a couple of examples where we compute this and sort of see the relative strength of various players. So if you're computing this power index for each player, let me just say one more piece of vocabulary. We call that the Banzhaf power distribution. So that's just the set of all these numbers. Distribution. All right. And that's just, as I said, this is just beta 1, beta 2, so on, up to beta n. So we're going to compute this, and we're going to rely a little bit in one example on what we did last video, which was compute sort of these critical counts. So in the last video, we had a situation where there was some stock, and players 1 through 4 had a certain number of shares, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we did the critical counts. So we looked and we saw all of these winning coalitions here. These are all listed out, and these are the winning coalitions in which the player 1 is critical, is a critical player. If you removed player 1 from any of these winning coalitions, that particular winning coalition would no longer be a winning coalition. That's what it means to be a critical player in a coalition. And then we counted, we found these as well for players 2 and 3. And then finally for player 4, there was only one winning coalition, and it was this one, in which one winning coalition in which that player was critical. All right. And so now what do we need to do to go ahead and compute the Banzhaf power index for each of these players? Well, we need to find the total critical count, which is T, and it's just going to be the sum of all of our critical counts. So it's going to be 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1. Okay, that's 5 plus 3 is 8, plus 3 is 11, plus 1 is 12. Oops, let me put that in permanently. So we have the number 12, and now we can go ahead and compute the power index for each of these players. So the first player has a beta 1, and what all we have to do is we have to take the critical count and divide by the total critical count. So this is going to be 5/12. I'll zoom in a little bit here so we can see. Beta 2 is 3/12. Beta 3, also 3/12. And beta 4 is 1/12. And what's interesting maybe about this computation is that we're getting a power index that's not really exactly proportional to the weights. So the weights are sort of distributed 1, 2, 3, and 4, but that's not the case for the power index. In particular, you can look at this players 2 and 3, and while player 2 has one more weight than player 3, their power index is the same. And the point is that their influence in passing any kind of motion is basically the same. They're only critical in the same number of coalitions, winning coalitions, as each other. So that gives you that sense. While player 1, even though they only have one more vote than player 2, has a stronger power index, has a higher power index. All right. So let's continue. So we'll do one more of these computations. And as you can see, the computation is not particularly hard. It's just a matter of adding some numbers up and then making some fractions. And again, you could turn that into a percentage. In other words, you could write that out as a decimal, multiply by 100, and get a percentage. But I'm not going to do that in this lecture, but you may see that in the book. All right. So this example, I've written out the critical player coalitions, and just want to go through those a little bit for the time being. So this is a hypothetical country where we have four political parties, and the distribution of votes is relatively even. I mean, it's one party has. I mean, there is an ordering, but they're pretty close in the number of representatives in their parties. Um, but you can see, of course, that the first weight has a bit more than the others. The first player, pardon me, has a bit more than the others. And so we go ahead and if you write out all the winning coalitions, the quota is a simple majority, is 86. Um, and if you write out all of the critical player, or sorry, the winning coalitions, well, there are a few more winning coalitions than what is written here. In particular, the Grand Coalition is a winning coalition, but these are all of the ones that have critical players in them, and these are the ones that have P1 as a critical player. Um, and indeed, if you just take a look, say at this example of a winning coalition, well, this is has player one, three, and four. And well, you can see that this is 127 votes. That certainly exceeds the quota of 86. But if you removed player one, there's only 77 votes. So that's lower than the quota, and therefore player one is a critical player in that coalition. So nonetheless, we've made this count, and this critical count is just the number of coalitions that are listed here. Okay. And this example is kind of interesting to me because when you look at the critical counts of the final three, they're all the same. So you have one uh, with a weight 50, the others 43, 40, and 37. They're all relatively close, but one seems to have much higher power than the other three. And indeed, we can measure this by doing the total critical count, which is again 12. T equals 6 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 12. And then we can compute this power index by dividing here. And so beta 1 is 6 over 12. Beta 2, 2 over 12. Beta 3, also 2 over 12. All three of these have 2 over 12 as their power index. And you can reduce these, but again, I think it shows more of the proportion when you don't reduce. But certainly what you can see is that beta 1 is really is 0.5. So that reduction is a half. So in a sense, half the power is concentrated with player one, or with the first political party, even though it has far more than half or far less than half of the weights, the total weight. So it has that much of an impact on winning coalitions. All right. So that's all I have to say about Banzhaf Power. There are a few more examples in the book. I encourage you to take a look at those examples, but we will move on from this.